Hello everyone, and welcome to Beyond Multiple Choice 2025, hosted by ourselves, the eAssessment Association. It's great to have you with us for the first of 9 webinars, which will run over the next 3 weeks, 3 webinars each week, exploring how technology and innovation are helping us move beyond traditional question types in assessment. Throughout the series, we'll be hearing from experts and practitioners leading change across education, training and professional assessment. And also keep an eye out over the next few weeks. We'll be sharing some exciting news about our EAA International Conference 2026 and our EAA International eAssessment Awards, as well as a few other little member initiatives that we're running as well. So to start our series, it's really great to welcome Dr. Rajeshwari Iyer, and I will pass over to her now for the opening talk today. Thanks very much, Dr. Raj.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone. Big welcome. As Adam said, the first of the series. So I think it promises to be a really exciting one. Lots of different themes happening. And I'm quite excited to be the opening speaker. Hopefully you've got an hour or so of 45 minutes or 50 minutes of me talking, and then lots of time for some questions. So, delighted to be here today, and thank you so much for joining. I just wanted to share our experience of working in the sort of post-16 certification sector as a supplier, but lots of great insights coming in, and how expert examiners and AI are working together to kind of transform and take eAssessment to sort of the next level. And really, I think it's a perfect partnership and the best way to roll out AI for assessments, whether it's digital exams or even sort of pen and paper. So just very quickly about myself, I am one of the founders of a company called Synaptic. I have been in AI for about 20 years now, deploying domain-specific AI tools. I started my career within the clinical sciences sector. So I was in academia for a long time, looking at models of how the human brain works. So I also bring in that sort of neuroscience expertise into the AI, and looking in my last job where I was leading the research for the London ambulance service. I was looking at deploying AI, natural language processing, machine learning technologies to derive insights from clinical text data, so patient records, and so on, to see how we could improve not only the clinical efficiencies within the NHS and specifically the London Ambulance Service, but also how we can improve the operational activities that we had in place. So really lots and lots of experience building and deploying domain-specific tools from scratch, basically. And that's the sort of expertise that I bring into Synaptic. So what I wanted to cover today was basically, I'll start with a little bit of what sort of the state of the art today is within the awarding post-16, as well as the apprenticeship space. Just even, quickly going through sort of across the education sector, and then move into some real sort of market insights, primarily coming from learnings that we have from our clients, particularly within the sort of apprenticeship and certification space, and really just show you examples of how expert examiners, humans, are using human-in-the-loop AI. They're essentially working in collaboration with us to develop, human-in-the-loop AI systems, particularly for the assessment space, and how they're improving their own assessment practices. And then I just want to finish off with some sort of challenges that, just us as suppliers, we face, and why it's taken us so long to really bring AI into the education market. And, we've seen disruption across fintech and medtech, and finally, I think education is about to see, or it is seeing, that kind of disruption. But just highlight from a supplier's perspective as well. So what we're seeing, obviously we're all aware that there are hundreds of millions of learners getting certified with job-ready skills every single year, but the sector is really struggling just historically with low pass rates, as low as 30% in some accounting exams. And this is ironically despite training providers and educators trying to spend a lot of time, in fact more than 20% of their time spent in evaluating knowledge and trying to give detailed, high quality, regular feedback and analyzing their marking to derive cohort level analytics and so on. And just within the marking and feedback realm of assessment, it costs the UK almost £8 billion every single year in expenditure. So this is both formative assessments, but also running of lots and lots of final summative exams. And the problem, within the assessments, obviously, there's multiple levels all the way from, qualifications spanning the entire spectrum of education from schools all the way to continuous professional development. We've got assessments and it's very, very complicated because of the fact that especially within the vocational and professional qualification space, the variety of assessment approaches that we have, it just makes assessments a lot more complicated, not just marking and feedback, but also development of assessments and always keeping the learner at the core with the integrity of the exams and so on. So especially within the sort of space that we are working in, we see a lot of competency-based, skills-based assessments, not so much formative learning. So hopefully with AI-based tools that will change as we go through and become more mature at adopting AI tools. But largely assessments are summative for that final certifying stage, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's awards at different levels as well. There's a little bit of workplace-based learning and so on. Within the formative exam space, what we are seeing is there's a little bit of focus on mock exams, which are being offered by some awarding bodies. And within the apprenticeship world, it's very much a portfolio-based assessment where learners submit evidences of learning as they are progressing through their on-program and off-program. So really, I mean, the state of the art there without the AI is assessors and educators spending a huge amount of time creating high-quality assessments, trying to assess the right skills and right type of competency based on the appropriate assessment type. And of course, needless to say, a huge amount of time goes in marking and analytics and feedback, desperately trying to give regular feedback to their learners. But often, it's a time-consuming task and the quality of marking and the feedback does go down with time. There's, with the advent of AI, some of the clients that we are working with are really struggling with validating the validity of the submissions that are coming in through via learners, because that's, plagiarism has historically been a problem, but now there's AI generated content as well that is being submitted as part of. And a lot of the time, assessors are spending time and resources just trying to find the right tools to be able to detect AI generated content within examinations. So unfortunately, that is the state of the art without AI in the picture, and it's not a pretty picture. People are now scrambling to adopt AI to help them to solve some of the problems, because thanks to ChatGPT, at least there's now huge awareness that yes, AI is good enough to be able to solve some of the issues that we've been grappling with for decades. So at this point, I just want to take you through some of the use cases of AI just across the assessment sort of realm of assessments, but as related to the different types of AI that is now beginning to surface and going to the market. So this is just sort of an artificial map of artificial intelligence. I borrowed the source hasn't come through. I borrowed this from a report, and it really nicely kind of maps up all the different kinds of AI that are being developed from scratch, and how they are used within the context of e-assessments. So, for example, deep learning is a type of AI where LLMs and ChatGPT belongs to sort of this type of AI, and deep learning is really teaching a machine to replicate or simulate how our brains actually work. So it consists of lots of neural networks, just as how we've got within our own brains, and we teach it with lots and lots and huge amounts of data to be able to perform tasks such as what large language models are very, very good at doing. So what we're seeing within the assessment space, again, these are just surfacing. So not a whole lot of names to pop out, but in general, there's some use of conversational AI, so leveraging LLMs to help, for example, medical students to practice, or train drivers to practice the way they speak and respond to medical situations, or a nasty situation within the train network, for example, and in a sort of feedback-driven manner, but in a very nice conversational style, which is a very easy to, it's a very natural way of sort of speaking. The AI models are able to assess what kind of conversation did the medical student sort of give in response to something that the AI model said, and it's a little bit of a back and forth. And the AI, based on those conversations, is also doing some sort of assessment in the background to give some feed-forward type feedback to the learners. Primarily, I've seen this, the low-hanging fruit application is for formative learning, but that's a great place to start. Hopefully we can validate these models at the formative learning stage before they can actually be deployed for summative marking. NLP is natural language processing, very related also to deep learning, to be honest, but NLP is primarily used for text-based assessments, where you've got something beyond MCQ, so very text-heavy submissions, and the market is now seeing a lot of marking and feedback tools that are coming up, primarily based on, again, LLM sort of models, but there are some that are also using very foundational natural language processing techniques to be able to not only process text-based submissions, but also use additional data, metadata, learning materials, and marking rubrics, and so on, to develop feedback. Computer vision is another type of AI where it's a computer or a software that's dealing with images and videos, processing, extracting lots of different features and information that's inferred from what's being spoken and how that's related to the actions within the video, for example. Computer vision has been around actually for a long time within the assessment space, and now it's just sort of really picking up for purposes of proctoring, handwriting recognition. So I said pen and paper assessments. We see a lot of test centers who are still doing assessments on pen and paper, and so computer vision is very useful for optical character recognition, so transcribing handwriting text into a digital sort of format. And AR, VR, again, I haven't personally seen it being used for summative assessments yet, but definitely sort of training and assessment for learning, especially within the sort of medical training, or fire safety and sort of health and safety, those kinds of fields where we do see some AR/VR being used. Machine learning has been, I'm sure you've all heard of machine learning algorithms that help with personalized learning. They've been around for years together, ever since we've sort of had computer-based testing. So primarily based on multiple choice questions, but super, cool algorithms that help to derive lots of different insights that, is just humanly impossible for us to do. And so, yeah, that's sort of being used by a lot of learning management systems and test providers. Robotics, I've actually not seen much use of, and I don't know how to hide this. Yeah, there we go. There's also expert systems. Expert systems are historically very sort of simple, rules-based artificial intelligence machines who, are able to don't need huge amounts of data to be trained, but they primarily work on very deterministic rules, to be honest, in the background, but it's just lots and lots of them. So it simulates the essence of artificial intelligence. And they've historically been used, also been around for a few years in adaptive testing. So where, item response theory. So as a student responds and goes through the tests, a test becomes more easy or more difficult based on the responses. So that's really just a sort of whistle top tour of what's sort of state of the art in terms of AI. This is a very overwhelming slide, but I just want to highlight that there's lots and lots of suppliers out there developing or have already developed platforms and now integrating AI within their platforms or within the tools that they offer. And really just, look at the breadth of AI use cases. There's, within the admin side of things, there's enough use cases where AI can offer improved operational efficiencies. And then, of course, there's the teaching and learning side where, there are tools that are specifically made for educators and also, B2C, so directly going to learners. I do see questions coming in, so just sort of I didn't do any housekeeping, but we'll take some time to make sure that I answer some of your questions at the end of the talk, if that's all right. So let's address the elephant in the room, of course, ChatGPT. And I know I'm very confident that some of you at least have tried to use ChatGPT for various things, maybe summarize my report, or, can you, here's an assessment and here are the marking rubrics. Can you please mark pretending to be an expert, I don't know, medical tutor. That's great. We've recently seen a few sort of organizations come to us saying that actually that's becoming a problem because there are few assessors who are super tech savvy, very comfortable using, ChatGPT, the interface, and know exactly how to do their prompt engineering, and are able to get satisfactory results for their marking, for example, or even for test generation, item banking, and so on. But it's being used in silos. A lot of them are following the herd, trying to use ChatGPT, for example, without, keeping in mind or without knowing how to turn on some of the guardrails that actually ChatGPT does offer. Also, just a sort of word of caution, it is a generative language model. It hasn't been designed or calibrated to behave like an examiner. It's not been exposed to all the structured data that an AI tool needs to be exposed to before it is asked to perform a task automatically. So these are just some, terms of caution that you just need to keep in mind. It lacks domain specificity. Historically, ChatGPT, for example, or most of the LLMs that have come out of, the American sort of that side of the pond have historically been exposed to a lot of Western data. And therefore there's a lot of bias, and I'm sure you all are aware of hallucinations and all of those things, which we can deal with, but not necessarily individuals within organizations have the skills to be aware of what needs to be done. And so what we are seeing is that actually it's adding to the administrative burden of individual assessors or educators using ChatGPT in their own way, without being compliant even with the sort of company policies. Why not, right? It is quite easy to use, so it's quite tempting to just simply copy paste ChatGPT's outputs without review. So, human in the loop, and that doesn't necessarily happen because ChatGPT's interface is just such that it doesn't prompt you to make sure that you've reviewed everything. And it does get quite expensive when we are working with awarding bodies who are marking hundreds of thousands of exams. It's quite, generative AI tools can become very, very expensive before you know it. And so, yeah, I think it's a great tool, but to be used with the extra caution. So this is a quick sort of poll that I did in my previous webinar. It was mostly awarding organizations in that webinar. And the question was, how would you like to use, or how do you use AI within your own practice? So this is just for, some fun. Obviously, there was a lot of item generation, question generation, and needless to sort of say, grading and automated scoring of essays and marking help. Identifying malpractice. I'm sure that's a sort of favorite type of a topic among some of us here. So plagiarism detection, AI detection, and so on. And assurance and review and, revisioning of what they've done and so on. So basically looking at quality assurance. So coming to sort of, human in the loop, I'm sure you've all come to know of this phrase by now. But why is human in the loop so important? From an educator's perspective, so from many of your shoes, I think it's because learner-centric, right? You're always keeping learners at the core of what you want to do, the assessments that you create, the feedback that you give. It has to be for the benefit of the learner. And that is, totally understandable. But what about from a developer's perspective? Or from a supplier's perspective who is developing AI tools? For us, human in the loop is even more important because there is a big lack of reliable data, which is not readily available within this sector as compared to, medical, the NHS, or fintech, for example, where there's huge amounts of very reliable, readily accessible data that's available. And so human in the loop AI becomes even more relevant, especially when we are trying to develop tools from scratch for specific tasks, such as, let's say, item generation, or let's say marking and feedback, or even proctoring and so on. And so having that human oversight as we use almost new data, not only to train models, but to also validate and also maintain, so post-deployment. So human in the loop is very, very important, even for us when we are developing AI tools. And this is quite different, honestly, from fintech or maybe some other sort of commonly available AI where there's data readily available. So there are companies that sell very, very high quality, highly annotated data. There are repositories out there from where you can load annotated data to be able to train your own AI model or a third-party AI model, and then you put a wrapper around it and you sell it as an app. So all of that is possible, but actually within the education sector, that's very hard to do because there's not enough data of this kind that's really available. And so in this case, human in the loop becomes even more important. So just sort of a quick reminder of what, the steps that go into developing an AI model. Firstly, we need to decide what kind of task. Is it for summarization? Is it for marking and feedback? Is it for item generation? So what do we want the AI model to do? We then, select existing models to adapt to our task, or we can develop, from scratch, which is a lot harder to do, but very, very much possible. And then, we've got to go through the process of collecting high quality data. Often it's a large amount of data, and then, prepare the data, which means annotating, labeling, and so on. Then you go through the model training, the evaluation, and then sort of deployment. And this sort of process is iterative, and sometimes all the way up to model selection as well, because sometimes there are multiple models to do the same thing, and one might work better than the other. And in a lot of that iterative process, in all of these sort of iterative, what am I doing? Sorry. There you go. So all of these steps, it's important to have that human touch, or that expert domain expertise that is shared with the technology team to be able to develop the sort of most efficient and highly accurate AI model possible. So that means we've got to make sure that there's expert inputs being taken into account when we're training the model, so that the model is trained accurately. Post-deployment, we still need to have human in the loop, because there may be edge cases coming up, a student answer that the model has never come across, so it's just been written in a very, very nuanced way. And so the examiner might deem that, yeah, actually that makes sense. I am going to award them marks, but the AI would have been maybe too strict. And so that feedback is very, very crucial, so that the next time the model knows that, oh, well, it might be an edge case, but actually it makes sense in this scenario as well. So maintaining the model and its accuracy, even post-deployment, human in the loop is super important. And all of that makes AI models very explainable and therefore trustworthy, and so on. So really, at every stage, so when data is being collected, us, for example, when we collect data from our own clients, we make sure that, are all permissions in place. Whose data are you using? Is it student data? Is it your own proprietary data? If not, then do you have copyright? So you've got to make sure that that ethical aspect is also coming in, and that can be provided only with human experts, either operational or examiners themselves. Once data has been collected, we've got to make sure that it's organized in an AI-ready sort of format. And again, we work in close collaboration with examiners to make sure that we understand what different types of data and what the different components of data mean. Rubrics versus marking scheme versus the question versus a model answer. So how is all of that related to each other? And almost, can we develop sort of a knowledge graph of what that looks like, so that we are structuring the data in the best possible way so that it becomes AI ready and it can just be fed into the model for training. Now that's kind of the preparation of the data. More importantly, when it's marking and feedback, for example, often, mark scheme is not enough. We need to see, so an examiner's expertise comes across in their own marking. And so those nuances are often, they can be very easily automatically inferred by AI models, but sometimes, again, there are edge cases. And so we need that examiner's input to share with us, would you give a mark for this, portion of a learner's answer, and why? Because that why then becomes very important in us ensuring that the AI model that we've developed is also explainable, and it can also say why it's given a mark or why it generated this particular mark scheme for this kind of a question when it's item generation and so on. So, that's sort of part of the data preparation. Then, of course, during model training, while AI models are being trained, they are constantly being tested against test data. So where there are discrepancies, where there's low confidence, again, we go back to our clients, for example, to make sure that we have that expertise coming in, and we are retraining the model then and there before it is deployed. So that's part of the evaluation phase. And then, post deployment, there's also feedback coming in after we've deployed. So traditionally, sort of human in the loop, it's quite a complicated subject in the technical field. There's, lots of different ways in which you can introduce humans in the loop during the development phase of AI. I don't want to bore you with too many technical aspects, but it's quite important that as end users, you also understand what goes into developing AI tools and what it means to have human in the loop and how AI becomes human in the loop AI. Ultimately, it's just software and it's a piece of code. But there's a lot that goes in the background to develop human in the loop AI tools. And traditionally, there's sort of three very crude, frameworks that technologists use to develop human in the loop AI. One of them is, active learning, where the AI model itself, in fact, the AI model prompts humans to give the AI model more feedback. So, for example, if it's predicted a value for something and it has a low confidence, it will prompt the human to give it some feedback so that when it retrains itself based on the feedback that's the human has given, the model accuracy immediately improves. So it's a constant iterative process. But in active learning, as the name might kind of suggest, it's the model is in control of its own learning, and it prompts humans to come in, give it some help with the sort of right sort of prompts or right feedback so that it can improve itself and it learns. So that's sort of one kind of, one way of keeping human in the loop and one way of developing human in the loop AI. The other one is interactive learning. And this is the one that you might see more often, or you yourselves come across more often in AI tools that you would use, where humans are at the center, or they are the ones who are in control of the data. They prompt the AI to give it more labeled data if they think that the AI is not performing as accurately as it should. And all of these methods, the why is very crucial, as I already said, because that then makes the AI more explainable. This is just to sort of highlight the complexity of all the different things that we've got to think of before we develop human in the loop AI, because traditionally AI has just been a black box, and a lot of companies have come under a lot of pressure to make the models a lot more explainable. And so this is really just to highlight, some of the aspects and characteristics of what an interactive machine learning tool does when it's learning, and how it's applied in sort of different scenarios. Okay, so how are some of our clients? So this is really just to show you examples of where AI is being used and how examiners are keeping themselves quite involved with the sort of different processes in which they are using AI. So one of them, item generation. So we have, we are working with an endpoint assessment organization. They do, lots of different STEM-related assessments. And one of the things that they've historically struggled with is not giving their learners enough formative opportunities for formative learning or formative assessments. And so, at a high level, we're creating a mock exam platform for them. But really, the human-in-the-loop automatic item generation framework that we're using, again, this is from paper if some of you are interested, but once you have the slides, you can have a look at the paper as well. At a very high level, for item generation, you've got to define some parameters. The AI generates an item or an item bank. The examiners review that for accuracy and also, is it really relevant? Is it asking the right questions? So pedagogical fit. Check for bias and hallucination. Very, very highly expert examiners, 100% are skilled to do that. But unfortunately, not all of us have the right skills to actually identify correctly where there's hallucination happening. And then, of course, there's, accept or, you reject and ask the AI to regenerate. And then you archive that and you use it. But really, where the human in the loop comes in, which is of super importance, of course, in this, the review bit, but a lot happens before the sort of defining of parameters. So we've, asked the EPAO to share with us historical banks of questions that they've, historically their expert examiners have developed for all of the different standards that, they offer the exams for. What occupational standards do we have to look at? What are the statements within those occupational standards? And any additional rules that they would use. So in a mock exam, for example, how do you want to test based on the KSPs listed in that occupational standard? Or actually, we don't want to look for behaviors, we're only looking for this and this knowledge and this skills. So are there any additional rules that would go into defining the parameters to be able to generate the right type of mock exams? And access to as much as possible of their teaching and learning resources that support the AI with additional context. Now, just handing us teaching and learning materials in terms of, lots and lots of PDFs, that's great, but that's not really helpful. So again, we sit down in collaboration with, these educators and sometimes examiners to help us to annotate to a very high level of accuracy a lot of the data that comes to us before it has gone into training of the model to then generate items. So this is, one example of how, this EPAO is using AI to help them with almost creating a new product, I would say, for them. But with the idea that they want to help their learners achieve more, because historically they've suffered from, low achievement rates, apprenticeships, lots of dropouts. And so the idea is that with, on-demand mock exam generation and on-demand prompting of submission of portfolio of evidences with the AI feedback, which, I've not spoken about in this case, they want to help their learners to be best prepared for that final endpoint assessment. Let's look at marking and feedback. With marking and feedback, it is quite complicated, and you have to work with examiners at every step of the model development. Otherwise, we're just setting ourselves for trouble. So really, for example, we're working with an accounting body as well, and we have worked in close collaboration with their high stakes examiners to understand what their questions, it's all scenario based questions. It's all application and consolidation of knowledge. It's professional skills. So as you can imagine, it's one thing to develop high quality assessments. It's a whole, different ballgame to develop the marking guidance and do the marking and develop that, create, give high quality feedback. And as I said previously, often a lot of that feedback is actually stuck in historically marked responses. And so often we are left to infer a lot of things from those marked responses. And so all the way from data collection, where we are working with the examiners themselves to obtain data, structure it, organize them, prepare them to a very high quality. At every step of those processes, the examiners and the tech team is working in close collaboration, and that's your human in the loop. Next, again, while we are training and evaluating the AI model, there's examiners who are independently marking the same answers that the model is being trained on, so that we can benchmark the model's performance even before it's been deployed. So as the AI is being developed for the purpose of marking and feedback, expert examiners are giving their independent marking and feedback, and we are benchmarking the AI's performance against that, so that we are always matching, if not performing better than human assessors. And at this point, actually, the UI UX, which is also sort of human-led, that becomes quite crucial, because we don't want to add to their burdens while we are developing the AI models for them. And so the feedback and the human in the loop input that comes from human examiners, it has to be as easy as possible for them to share that feedback with, while the model is being developed. And so it's very important to also keep in mind how we are allowing humans to interact with the process of model development. And then obviously post-deployment, that's not the end. So point to note is that the time taken obviously for humans to moderate AI marking, for example, it reduces drastically as more and more student responses are being marked by AI, and that feedback is constantly coming in to help us iterate and moderate the model's marking and feedback as well. I am sort of running out of time here, but very quickly, another sort of use case that we've seen between sort of awarding bodies, training centers or training providers and endpoint organizations is having actually humans do the main job, but use AI to help them to quality assure themselves or quality assure the marking, for example, across all assessors or within the same assessor. Or, AI can actually intelligently, so for example, one of the EPAOs that we are working with, they've got lots and lots of centers who submit a lot of the assessments. So they do the assessments themselves, the centers do the assessments themselves, and it's the awarding body's job to make sure that the center's assessment practices are quality assured. Now, it's impossible for them to do this at scale if hundreds of, or thousands of assessments are happening every quarter, for example. So what they do right now is select a subsection of, center assessments and do their own independent marking in order to quality assure. And then, they take interventional steps when needed. Whereas with AI, they can now scale that effort and make sure that every center submission is actually rechecked or remarked or redone by AI, independent of the humans, and then that is then used. So any discrepancies there's a human in the loop at that point to make sure that any discrepancies are not the AI but actual discrepancies, and then that helps them to take any additional interventional steps. So this is a very interesting use case. Also, quality assurance, even from an exam board's perspective, is probably a lower hanging fruit for where they can start to adopt AI for quality assurance of assessors during the moderation process, rather than going straight ahead, marking, I don't know, GCSEs or A levels, for example. So this is an interesting sort of use case. So just to quickly go through, I do want to do questions. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this part of the webinar, but basically, there are some barriers to AI adoption still. So from, a supplier's perspective, we find that there is still a lot of uncertainty among awarding bodies or training providers on what the regulations are about use of AI within the assessment sort of landscape. There's a lack of clarity just within their own internal organizational or company policies. There's uncertainty on how to deal with data, not sure of how to share the data and so on. And even access to data, not everybody from organizations will have access to the right kind of data that we need. And so, we have to overcome those some of those barriers. Access to data also, again, it's just related to AI readiness in general, and also regulations and company policies and compliance and GDPR and so on. But also it's obviously very closely related to data governance and security. Although we put in place a lot of ways in which to share data securely, we still get data via email, so there's a lot of violations still. And so that then kind of relates to just in general, lack of awareness, and there's not enough AI skills yet within the sector. And, a lot, like we ourselves try to do a lot, for example, like doing these webinars, just to increase AI awareness within the sector broadly. And, adding to all the complexity is just file formats. There's lots of different ways of doing assessments, and, it gets quite interesting when we want to build sort of multimodal AI tools. Yeah, I just want to sort of close with, what does good AI look like? So always kind of, it's just sort of tips before I close. When you're dealing with suppliers, it's no harm if you ask them what kind of underlying models are you using? How was the technology developed and validated? Has it been, validated against a particular assessment or a domain? What kind of data was the model trained on? Has it ever seen, plumbing information before, or is this sort of out of the blue? And, who's on the team? Is it just, tech people just building something binary, or is it, actually a combination of pedagogical experts and tech experts as well? That is it. I did want to share. So this is not coming up. I might just go back and share the slides with you all after the webinar, but this one was just meant to point you to some newsletters and other sort of sources of good information to just keep up with all that's happening in AI. Okay, so let me quickly see if I can address some questions. There's lots and lots of questions, so thank you so much. Have you found any machine learning tools in the area of analytics that have overcome the problem of hallucinations? So yes, so as developers, there are a number of ways in which we can overcome hallucinations, and so it really just depends on the team that's developing, the models themselves. Now, hallucinations is a particular problem that exists in generative AI. So there is a lot of AI that is not generative AI. And so you will not have problems such as hallucinations when you look at, more classical, like classification-based and classical machine learning type AI tools. How do you mitigate against biases resulting from human-led feedback to train the AI where an examiner can score a candidate high because of... Oh, yeah, so that's a really good question. And that's exactly where the human in the loop is important, but important in how we get that information from them. So for example, if you are sharing data with a company that's helping you automate marking with their AI tool and they need to train their model, it's more important that you share a range of submissions. Please make sure that they are anonymized. AI does not need to know where a student comes from, what race they belong to, is it a male or a female, and so on. So completely anonymized data. And so in doing so, you will mitigate over so the AI being more generous always or being very strict always. So as long as you're making sure that you're sharing data that has a good range of marks. So I'm talking about student submissions that have been historically marked by humans, but it has a range of marks. So good submissions to bad submissions. That's one way of mitigating that risk. What are some standout NLP products for marking, feedback, and analysis? Are there any you particularly recommend? It would be foolish of me to not recommend Synaptic. So we are in the business of developing AI models specifically for the purpose of marking, feedback, and analysis. And we work only sort of with multimodal non-MCQ type submissions, so anywhere from sort of text to video submissions, images, which is very relevant for the apprenticeship sector. Since the last week overlaps with the ICE exchange, where many in our... Sorry, I've lost that question. Okay, for marking or QA applications, what's your recommendation on using LLMs securely? Should we deploy open source models locally, use tools like ChatGPT? Where's it gone? Or host models on private clouds to avoid leaking? Yes, so I would strongly recommend going enterprise level if ChatGPT is definitely something that you want to use and try out. Once you're using enterprise, there's a lot that you can do to make sure that you have all of the guardrails in place. You can switch off sharing of data. You don't necessarily need to have hosted privately. It can get quite expensive. But my sort of word of caution would be, if it's a few hundred assessments that you're marking and, so the rubrics are very high level, it's more English language type feedback that you're trying to give, and it's not necessarily subject specific, then, doing that via sort of LLM securely enterprise grade level should be good enough. Sorry, forgive my ignorance. What's oh, sorry. Yeah, recos was short for recommendation. What are some tools you would recommend for localized AI models for generative AI that developers can incorporate easily in AI-driven workflows for assessment? So when you say localized AI models, is that multilingual? I'm not sure how to answer that question, to be honest. If it's multilingual, then you don't really. So a lot of the generative AI LLMs are very good with language translation. And so, those can be easily incorporated within whatever sort of front end that you're developing. Have you found any machine learning tools? So have I answered all questions? I'm not sure. Oh, this one, yes, all meetings will be recorded. So this is the one relating to the ICE exchange where many of our community will be attending. So yeah, all meetings will be recorded and available after the event. Okay, so what safeguards are in place to prevent over-reliance on AI when marking high stakes? Yes, I think that does come down to a level of training that the organization will have in place. To be honest, as a supplier, we don't take that responsibility. For us, it's it's a tool, we've kind of deployed it. That agency to make sure that you are, as an examiner, you are adding your expertise to the AI, even though the AI is actually doing a good job of marking and feedback, having the oversight on just company policy and making sure that you're compliant. I think that does come down to the training that your organization may have in place. To make sure that people are not over-relying on AI and just letting it do. I mean, off-call, obviously, for high-stakes examinations, off-call, which is the UK's regulatory body, very clearly says that AI cannot be the sole marker. So you do have to have the sort of human oversight before certifying learners for their qualifications. How can you train an AI tool to remove all personally identifiable information so you can pass on anonymized student submissions? Oh gosh. Well, I don't know. That's a whole new sort of task that we'd have to train a model to do. I'm sure it's doable. But yeah, the short answer is I don't think I can give you an answer today immediately. Sorry. Okay, so we've only got a few seconds remaining, so that's my opportunity to say a big thank you to everyone for coming today, for asking all of those lovely questions, and I really hope that you found the session informative, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the BMC conference.